Hey guys, it's Karen. I'm doing this year of reading one's own starting Tuesday, which is 6 days from now. But I just wanted to go through the books that I have read, just to kind of show you some of them. The bookshelf behind me is the books that are either signed or I've met the author, or they're signed and I've met the author. So I thought I would just like walk through the bookshelf. I don't want to talk about every title, but like if there's a cool story or something, then I will talk about it. So if you're interested, keep watching. All right, guys, so this is the bookshelf as a whole. The books that are to the left of it are signed books that I have not read yet. So yeah, we're not going to talk about those right now, but this is kind of like my little reading nook. And my yoga nook too. And my dog is sleeping. Okay, so this is the top shelf. This Margaret Atwood book, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it actually. And it took me a really long time to read it. Like I received the book and I didn't read it until a few years later. But I really liked that one. Actually, there are some I feel like Margaret Atwood, like she just like knows the future or something. There are some things that were in there. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like our current political situation. So yeah, I really liked that one. Rachel Birchie, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but I was her author escort at Lit Fest. So that was pretty cool. Austin Channing Brown, this book is amazing. But I actually met her by accident. So this book is not signed, but I have met her. I was in a bookstore in Grand Rapids, and I believe she lives in Grand Rapids, but she just happened to be there. So we were both in the same bookstore. She wasn't like speaking or anything. She was just there and I was there. Thought that was cool. So these are signed. I'm trying to think what else. Oh, Jonathan Safran 4. I just met before this COVID-19 thing started. He was my last author event. I believe it was on a Tuesday in Kalamazoo. And he almost didn't come. He was talking about how in New York, his kid's school is closed. He works for NYU. His school was closed. And there was no book signing, which I already figured there wouldn't be just because of germs and things. But I was kind of shocked to hear how bad things were in New York. And when I got back to work the next day, I was telling everyone about how my night was and all that stuff because I was out pretty late on a school night. And they were shocked too, like, oh, that's so crazy that New York is so bad. And then by Thursday night, our governor had closed schools too. So it's crazy that all of that happened so fast, and I don't know that everyone was really thinking about it. This book, The Wildlands, I love this book so much. Like, I just remember, like, speed reading through it. But it was also, like, it dealt with some tough stuff, too, so it wasn't just light. Elizabeth Gilbert, I was supposed to meet her, but I can't because of COVID. It was canceled. This is signed, Jane Goodall. Oh, my gosh. Signed. I would like to read more of her stuff. I own a few more, so that would be cool. All right, so that's the first shelf. Second shelf, I talked before, not on this channel, but just in comments with people about signed Pulitzer. So this one's signed. I have a signed Tom Hanks book. He is actually really good at writing short stories. Imagine Me Gone. I love this book. It's about mental health and things like that. I met him in Chicago. It was signed actually before I met him, but then I met him again. A lot of my books that are signed are from the first edition book club through Parnassus, which I'd really like to do a video on sometime. Not like they aren't like paying me or anything, but I just feel like that book club literally has changed my life, and I really want to talk about it. Okay, Barbara Kingsolver, I feel like is perfect to read right now when you're at home and people are kind of anxious about stuff. Like, her writing to me, even if it deals with difficult things sometimes, is so soothing. And like when I met her in person in a suburb of Chicago 2 years ago. But when I read her books now, I can like literally hear her voice in my head. She has the most soothing voice. If you want any of her books on audio, that's good too. And this one is hilarious. Like, it's so serious. It deals with so many issues, but just the political references that she's obviously like making fun of certain things just makes my day. I love it. I was also Jenny Lawson's author escort before. Anthony Mara, I met. He is like the most beautiful human. Oh my gosh. Okay. This book is so interesting. I did a blog post on it. So I'm really into anything Swedish. That's where my family's from, like way back in the day, but for some reason I'm just really interested in Sweden. So I think I saw this book at the library and I was like, oh, that sounds cool. I like nature. I like Sweden, whatever. I'm just going to read it. So I'm like this is probably TMI, but I'm in the bathtub reading it. And the author, Linda, is talking about this place that she likes to go for, she likes to go to on walks, like a place that is in her area that she goes hiking. And she's telling the story about it. And as she's telling it, I'm like, oh, that's so weird. It sounds like this one place I go to hike quite often. And I just keep reading more details. Oh my gosh, like this is so much like that place. Oh, that makes it even more like, and like finally I'm like, oh my gosh, she is talking about the exact same place that I hike as well. And she doesn't mention it by name because of her experience there was actually quite bad in the particular instance that she's talking about it. But anyway, so I like get out of the bathtub, I like go to Facebook, I find her on social media, and I private message her, whatever, and I'm like, are you talking about blah, blah, blah place? And she said, yes, I was. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're my neighbor. And so anyway, I ask her, like, hey, I collect signed books. Where can I get a signed copy of your book? And so she tells me this coffee shop. And I think it was either a Saturday or school break. I don't really remember, but I think it might have been during spring break. Anyway, I go to this coffee shop to get her signed book, and I'm just like kind of making it fun for myself. Like I get the signed book, but I'm also just hanging out there for a little bit, like having some snacks, some coffee, just reading for a little bit because I love just hanging out in coffee shops. And I'm getting all cleaned up. I'm about to leave, and she walks in. And I recognize her, and she recognizes me from social media, and she gives me the most giant hug. Like, she initiated a hug, and we just talked for a few minutes, and yeah, so I adore her, and this is a really good book just on being outside in nature more, and it really inspired me, like, even it's about children and being a parent and all that stuff, which doesn't apply to me, but even as an adult, it really encouraged me just to get outside more. All right, so we are now to the third shelf of this bookshelf, and I was her author escort at Lit Fest a few years ago. This is a signed Pulitzer. Joyce Carol Oates, I met her in Chicago last year or the year before. It's hard for me to remember which year I met people. Anyway, the Sacrament, this book is signed. This would be an amazing book for maybe mid-rash. It is so good. I really enjoyed it. It's about a scandal in the Catholic Church, and this nun has to kind of go and investigate. It goes back and forth like throughout time. So it's a little hard sometimes to keep track of which time you're in, if you're in the past or if you're in the present day, but I really, really, really enjoyed it. And the ending, I was like, oh. Okay, so anyway. Ann Patchett, obviously I love Parnassus. I love Ann Patchett. My favorite fiction book of hers is State of Wonder. And I know she says like that she gets better writing with each of her books, but this was my favorite. This one was like, I don't know, shortlisted for the Pulitzer, or it was on, I don't know what it's technically called, but it was on like a list to maybe win the Pulitzer, but I like this one better. And as far as her nonfiction, I love this book so much. She is amazing to listen to it on audiobook because she reads it, but she just talks about all sorts of things, life, marriage, writing. I love her essay and writing in here. Okay. This book, people, I read this before it came out, and I read it during a time when I was kind of considering like am I in the right place as far as my job? And so I was kind of having this conversation with myself, going back and forth, and like it was just the perfect time to read this. One of my favorite lines, I don't remember exactly, but it's basically saying like, you can know that it's time to move on, but appreciate where you came from. Kind of like appreciating your past, but it's time to go. And so this really encouraged me to make a huge like move to a different state, and to do some things in my career that I wouldn't necessarily do. And like, that's not even what it's about. It's just a book of essays. They're hilarious. They cover all different topics, but they're also like really deep, and they cover like mental health, parenting, all these like more intense topics, perfectionism, but in such a hilarious way. So the author is very active, Mary Laura Philpott. She's very active on social media. And so I've kind of gotten to know her over the years on social media. Like, she actually knows who I am, which is crazy. And it's not just me like being a weirdo on the internet and like telling her stuff. She reaches out to me sometimes to tell me stuff, which I love. So anyway, I'm so obsessed with this book, like genuinely, that she actually ended up asking for my personal address, and she sent me like a thank you postcard, which I thought was so nice. So I adore her. Okay, Marilyn Robinson, I met in person. She, oh my gosh, to hear her speak, like she talks so over my head, but I'm just like, my jaw is open. I'm just like soaking it all in, and she's like the wisest person I've ever met. I think Lila is it's my first book I've read by her, and it's my favorite. Gilead is not signed, but since I met her, it's okay. Lila is signed, this one's signed, and then I have other unread books by her that I need to get to. So not necessarily, these are only the books that are signed or I met the author and I've read them. So there's a lot of books that are signed that are not on this shelf. Okay, we need to talk about this one too. So Wade Rouse, at least in the city, someone would hear me scream. I picked this up because I was living in like a rural area in Illinois, and it just sounded so funny to me. It was actually recommended to a friend by a friend as well, but I just thought it was such a funny title because like I connected to the struggle to be in the country. And so anyway, it's about these two gay guys, they're a couple, and they move from like a more populated area to rural Michigan. And they moved just outside of a town I go to all the time, because the town that they moved to, there's like a really cute like upscale downtown area, but I think they live like in the country outside of that. And so it's just this hilarious story about how they start to like cope to living in the middle of nowhere in Michigan and in the winter. So, okay, but he came to this museum that's kind of by my house last year, and I kind of knew it was going to be people who are not my age, which I'm really good with making friends with old people. That's like my thing that people tease me about. But it wasn't quite time yet for the event, so I'm just kind of waiting in my car. And I'm like, okay, well, it's probably time for me to go in now. So I opened my car door, and I didn't realize that there was someone in the car next to me, and they actually opened their car door at the same time. We didn't hit or anything, but we were like, just like, oh, sorry, you know. And it's Wade next to me, and he's like, did you just write about me on Facebook? Like, he recognized me too. And I was like, yes. And he's like, hey girl, and all this stuff. So we talk from the parking lot all the way into the museum where the event was being held. And yeah, so then I listened to his event, and it was so lovely. And then I get into line afterwards, and he's like, hey girl. And yeah, he gave me the most giant hug as well in the signing line, but he was just like so fun. And he has a new book that he's working on. It's called The Adventures of Dorian Gay, and it's just another like memoir about him and his partner, who I might love his partner more than him. I'm not even sure. They're both hilarious. Holes. I don't think this book is definitely not signed actually, but I met him when I was a kid, so that's kind of cool. Signed and met, and I talked to him for a little bit before the event. I really loved this book though by George Saunders, The Brain-Dead Megaphone. There's an essay in here that reminded me again of our political situation, and I loved it. David Sedaris I met. Danny Shapiro. Oh, I met her in Chicago, and when I went to the signing line, I was telling her whatever I was babbling about that didn't even make sense because I just love her so much, and she asked me if I was a writer, and that made me feel so good. I didn't know, like, I don't even remember what I answered her because, like, yes, I write, but I'm not very confident that I'm a good writer or nothing's published, and I don't know. She just makes you feel so good, and she's the warmest. Well, there's a lot of warm authors actually, but she's very warm. So yeah, I've met a bunch of these, but I don't have any crazy stories. Oh, I do have. So R.L. Stein, I met him at an event as well, and I actually sat right next to his grandson. His grandson was next to me, and he carried with him this huge, like, antique looking journal sort of thing. It was giant. It was probably the size of like 4 regular books if you like stacked them, so that they're in a little group of 4. And it's just giant, and he obviously like loved his grandpa and his grandpa's work so much. He was probably like 10 or so. I don't know, it's hard to tell. And then next to him was R.L. Stein's son, who is probably closer to my age. He might be a little older than me, but he has no interest in his dad's work and has never read his books. So that was interesting for me to see how much his grandson was into this, and the son could care less. So down here, Elizabeth Strauss, love her, met her. I sat next to her husband at an event. I have a signed copy of The Goldfinch, which is amazing because I feel like she's a recluse. I've never really seen her at too many literary events. Like, well, I've never seen her at all, but I haven't heard of her going to many. I think she just kind of like, I don't know, the image of her is a recluse for me, that she's just kind of working. Coulson, I have a picture of me with him. I'm excited to read his newest book that won the Pulitzer, but I haven't yet. And that is it. So I hope you enjoyed that tour of the books on my signed or met or both bookshelf. I am curious if you guys like meeting authors. For me, I just feel like I grow so much as a person by listening to them, and like I feel like they're so wise, even if it could be just some random author that I just walk into their event at LitFest and I've never heard of them. I've never read their work. And maybe I leave not even interested to read their work, but this still just like hearing them speak, I learned so much from them. So the other thing I really like is I feel like authors are just, for the most part, chill. Like some of the most famous authors are not really like celebrities in the way they act. I didn't really share George Saunders. I had a conversation with him, and it was just like some regular guy that you're talking to. I was at an event, first in line. I'm always first in line. And he came up to me and he's like, "Oh, are you Jessica?" Or I don't know, whoever was supposed to be like his contact person at the event. And I was like, "No, I'm Karen." And he introduces himself as George Saunders as if I don't know who he is. And then we just start chatting for a while he's waiting for his person to show up to help him get ready for the event. But we're just talking about Chicago and his kids, and it's just like I'm talking to some, I don't know, it's like I'm talking to my dad or someone's dad, or like he's probably the same age as my dad. But yeah, so I just really enjoy meeting authors, and I'm curious what you guys think. What authors have you met? Do you enjoy meeting authors, or do you prefer just to read the books and not really make that connection to the author? Let me know in the comments. I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.